Hey you guys, Dustin here, and I'm at work and on my 3 o'clock break, and I'm in my pajamas slash scrubs, and every time I would wear these when I first started working here, Natalie would sing to me that song, I don't want no scrubs, a guy can't get no love from me. I know y'all don't know that song, but she would say that to me, but she does want a scrub, and that's me. But hey, I'm here at work, and I've been out of full-time ministry for about 18 months, and but during those 23 years, and even since then, I've had the opportunity and the kind of horrible privilege of doing funerals for people, and the most special and difficult of those has been where you help somebody say goodbye to their child. And I remember, gosh, probably about 5 years ago, a little young man in our area, it was actually, he died of DIPG, which I know those in Ocean Springs are familiar with. And I remember being at the funeral and just about to speak, and I remember his dad just out of sheer grief, just shouting, apologizing to his little boy who laid there in the casket, apologizing that he had not done more to save him, and just horrible. I've been in the hospital room with a family recently who their little girl died of the same thing, and just you can feel the grief, and they're strong people and they have faith, but you can feel the grief. And then the other night I was speaking at a recovery center here locally, which I've had the privilege to do, and right in the middle of the message, a young lady, probably, 25 to 27 years old, she raises her hand and basically, just totally off subject, just because she was hurting, just raised her hand and said, hey, I lost my child, I lost my little girl, and wanted prayer and was just struggling, and I couldn't help but do the math and think that, this is probably why, part of the reason why she's in recovery, just whatever it was her addiction, was part of her just trying to find comfort and to get through it. But anytime I'm in a situation like that, I always wonder, what am I going to say? What do you say to people? They've heard the cliches, although they're well-meaning, they're usually pretty stupid, to be honest with you. Just all kinds of things. But the other night, when the young lady raised her hand, I said what I'd thought about years ago that I thought was an answer that doesn't fix everything, doesn't make anybody feel immediately better. It's not some pill that you take, but it's something that brings comfort and over time, I think. And it's this. I always go back to the Bible, and I think about who lost a child in the Bible. Who can we connect with? Who can we make friends with in the Bible that lost a child? And I land on King David. David lost a little boy. It's in 2 Samuel, around chapter 12. He lost his son and was in absolute grief and couldn't eat. And and then when his child died, there's a little statement in there, about 23 verses down in the chapter, where David said, I cannot bring my son back to me, but I will go to him. In other words, we'll meet in heaven one day. And David tried to comfort himself with that, but I would say this, from the moment David said that, he probably lived another 40 or 50 years having to live with the grief of the loss of his son. 40 or 50 years, but here's what dawned on me. I imagined David's grief, and I thought, gosh, that's a heartbreak that I can't even comprehend. But I thought about this. David lived about 1000 BC, which right now that's about 3,000 years ago. So think about it. After his son passed away, he lived for about 40 or 50 years with horrible grief that nobody ever overcomes. But think about it now. It's 3,000 years later. And if I asked David during that 40 or 50 years how he felt about it, he would be devastated. He probably wouldn't be able to get the words out. And David's a man. He's tatted up and he's got biceps and he's a big dude. But he probably wouldn't have been able to breathe to say the words. But if I asked David 3,000 years later, David, how do you feel about the loss of your son? Here's the beautiful thing about heaven. Here's the beautiful thing about Jesus dying and rising from the dead and defeating death, is that over the millennia, over eternity, those of you who've suffered loss and those of us who suffer loss, we can't bring them back to us, as David said, but we can go to them. And here's the thing, if I said, David, how do you feel about it? After 3,000 years, I would bet everything in me that David can only vaguely remember that 40 or 50 years of suffering. Over eternity, he's had so much time with his son. He's gotten to be his dad, his friend, all of those things. He's gotten to know him personally for the last 3,000 years and celebrate with him. I can't imagine that David would probably answer something like this. Now, remind me of that 40 or 50 years. Remind me of that again, because he's had so much time. And here's the thing, David's been there 3,000 years with his son, and he hasn't even begun yet. 3,000 years out of eternity is nothing. So let me just say this. There's there's no pastor dust or Christian, pixie dust somebody can put on you to make you feel better. But do the math for a second. The suffering that you feel for these 30, 40, 50 years, however long God gives you, it's just enormous, and nobody should have to do it. And it's the dread of every parent. But I'll say this, in 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years, when we ask you to describe this time period and say, hey, how did you feel back then? You're going to have to be reminded of it, because you will have forgotten because of the grace of God. I love that verse, he'll wipe away every tear. I love that. Not right now, but then. So let me encourage you. I haven't had that deep grief of my own, but I sure have tried to share it with so many people. And the only thing that's really brought me comfort and that I've seen bring comfort to other people is just the thought of David 3,000 years later. That 40 or 50 years has been overshadowed, if not erased. So I just pray you always remember Jesus died and rose again. He defeated death. Death has no more sting, it says in 1 Corinthians 15. Revelation says he'll wipe all tears from our eyes. And David said, I can't bring him back, but I will go to him, and I'll get to enjoy eternity with the one I've lost. I pray some kind of comfort for you. My heart's with you. Wish I could fix it. Wish I had pastor dust to sling on you. But there's hope. Just do the math and let God give you a sense of peace through that. God bless you. Again, this is Dustin. You can go to dustinboles.com, and I'll provide some more resources on grief on there as time goes along. And just pray that you're blessed, and pray that you can be a blessing and comfort to someone else.